When you understand the idea that scarcity creates value, everything about attraction and memory starts to make sense. This is something Steve Harvey often hints at in his advice: people value what they feel they might lose, not what is always guaranteed to them. A woman who doesn't chase naturally places herself in that rare category, and rarity is what makes someone unforgettable. In today's world, attention is everywhere. Messages are instant, replies are fast, and people are used to constant access. Because of that, many men grow accustomed to women being readily available. They expect quick replies, emotional reassurance, and consistent effort without always having to earn it. Over time, this creates a pattern where the man is not required to invest deeply. He receives attention without having to pursue it. And when something comes easily, the human mind doesn't attach much value to it. It becomes normal, replaceable, and often forgettable. Now imagine a different scenario. A woman enters his life, and she doesn't operate like the others. She's kind, she's present, but she's not chasing. She's not trying to secure his attention or prove her worth. She's not rearranging her life to fit into his schedule. Instead, she has her own rhythm, her own priorities, and her own sense of fulfillment. Suddenly, the dynamic shifts. What he once took for granted is no longer being handed to him freely. And that's where scarcity begins to work its power. Scarcity doesn't mean absence, it means selective presence. It means she is there, but not always. She gives, but not excessively. She cares, but without losing herself. This balance creates a sense of unpredictability, and the human mind is deeply drawn to what it cannot fully predict or control. He starts to notice that her time is not easily available. Her attention is not something he can demand, it's something he has to earn. And in that moment, her value in his eyes begins to rise. The psychology behind this is simple but powerful. People assign higher value to things that are limited or harder to obtain. It's why rare items are expensive, why exclusive opportunities are desired, and why people chase what feels just out of reach. A woman who doesn't chase becomes emotionally limited access, not because she's playing games, but because she genuinely respects her time and energy. That authenticity is what makes it even more impactful. It's not a strategy, it's her standard. As he starts to feel that she's not easily attainable, something shifts inside him. His curiosity increases. He begins to think about her more often. He wonders what she's doing, who she's with, and why she's not reaching out. This curiosity is the beginning of emotional investment. And the more he thinks about her, the more space she occupies in his mind. That mental space is what later turns into memory and eventually into something he can't forget. Another important aspect of scarcity is that it forces effort. When something is not freely given, a man has to step up if he wants it. He has to initiate conversations, make plans, and show consistency. This effort creates a deeper connection because he is actively participating in the process. He's not just receiving, he's investing. And when a person invests their time, energy, and emotions into someone, they naturally become more attached. That attachment is what makes her unforgettable later on. On the other hand, when a woman chases, she often removes that need for effort. She fills the silence, she initiates constantly, and she makes things easy to the point where there is no challenge left. Without challenge, there is no pursuit. Without pursuit, there is no sense of achievement. And without that sense of earning something, the emotional connection doesn't deepen in the same way. It remains surface level, and surface level connections are easy to forget. Scarcity also creates emotional impact through contrast. When a man is used to constant availability from others, encountering someone who is different stands out immediately. She becomes memorable simply because she is not like the rest. Her behavior disrupts his expectations. And anything that disrupts a pattern tends to leave a stronger impression on the mind. It's the difference between hearing the same song every day and suddenly hearing something completely new. It grabs your attention and stays with you. There's also a level of self-respect tied into this. A woman who doesn't chase is silently communicating that she values herself. She is not willing to overextend or overcompensate for someone else's lack of effort. That kind of self-awareness is rare and it commands respect. Even if a man doesn't fully understand it at the moment, he feels it. And later, when he reflects on his experiences, that feeling becomes clearer. He realizes that what she had was different, and different is hard to replace. Over time, if the connection doesn't continue, her absence becomes even more powerful. Because she wasn't constantly available, her presence felt intentional. And when something intentional disappears, it leaves a noticeable gap. He remembers the way she carried herself, the way she didn't pressure him, the way she maintained her peace. These memories stand out because they contrast with other experiences that may have felt more demanding or chaotic. Scarcity in this sense is not about withholding love or playing emotional games. It's about understanding that your time, energy, and attention are valuable resources. When you give them freely without boundaries, people may enjoy them, but they won't always appreciate them. When you give them selectively, people recognize their worth. And once someone recognizes your worth, it becomes much harder for them to forget you. This is why a woman who doesn't chase leaves such a lasting impression. She becomes associated with value, with calmness, with something that wasn't easily accessible. And the human mind holds on to those experiences more tightly than the ones that came without effort. Even if a man moves on, even if life continues, that memory remains in the background, reminding him of a standard he once encountered but couldn't fully grasp at the time. In the end, scarcity creates value because it highlights importance. It draws attention to what matters by not making it constantly available. And when a woman embodies that naturally through her confidence, her independence, and her self-respect, she becomes someone a man doesn't just meet, but someone he remembers long after she's gone. When you really understand what it means for self-respect to command respect, you begin to see why some women leave a permanent mark on a man's mind while others are easily forgotten. This is something Steve Harvey often emphasizes in his perspective on relationships, how a woman sees herself teaches a man exactly how to treat her. Not through words, not through demands, but through her standards, her boundaries, and the way she carries herself. Self-respect is not loud. It doesn't beg for validation, and it doesn't chase approval. It shows up in quiet decisions, the decision to walk away from inconsistency, the decision to not tolerate confusion, the decision to not overextend just to keep someone interested. A woman who truly respects herself doesn't need to announce it. It's felt in her energy, in her responses, and even in what she chooses not to respond to. When a man meets a woman like that, it immediately sets a different tone. He realizes consciously or unconsciously that this is not someone he can treat casually, not because she's demanding or controlling, but because she has already established a standard within herself. She's not waiting for him to define her worth. She's already clear on it. And that clarity forces him into a position where he either rises to meet her level or he removes himself. There's no middle ground where he can give half effort and still keep her fully invested. This is where respect begins to form. Respect is not something that can be forced or negotiated. It's something that is earned and, more importantly, something that is recognized. When a woman respects herself, she naturally sets boundaries. She doesn't accept behavior that goes against her values. She doesn't entertain inconsistency, and she doesn't allow her emotions to override her standards. These actions send a powerful message to a man. If you want to be in my life, you have to show up correctly. What makes this so impactful is that many men are not used to it. They are used to situations where boundaries are flexible, where standards can be negotiated, and where effort is optional. So when they encounter a woman who is firm in her self-respect, it disrupts their expectations. They realize that they cannot approach her the same way they've approached others. And that realization alone creates a sense of importance around her. A man may not immediately express it, but he feels it. He notices that she doesn't tolerate excuses. He notices that she doesn't chase him for attention. He notices that when something doesn't align with her values, she quietly distances herself instead of arguing or trying to fix it. That kind of behavior stands out because it reflects strength, not dependency. And strength is something that commands respect naturally. Another important layer to this is emotional independence. A woman who respects herself is not emotionally dependent on a man's actions to feel secure. She doesn't base her mood on whether he calls or texts. She doesn't seek constant reassurance to feel value. Instead, she maintains her sense of self regardless of what he does. This stability is powerful because it removes pressure from the interaction while simultaneously increasing her value. A man begins to see that her presence in his life is not guaranteed, and that realization makes him take her more seriously. When a man feels that he has to earn a woman's presence, his behavior changes. He becomes more attentive, more intentional, and more consistent. Not because she asked him to, but because her self-respect created an environment where anything less would not be accepted. This is the difference between a woman who demands respect and a woman who commands it. One uses words to try to enforce behavior, while the other uses her actions and standards to naturally inspire it. Over time, this dynamic creates a deeper impression on a man. He starts to associate her with a certain level of quality and integrity. He remembers how she didn't tolerate nonsense. He remembers how she didn't lose herself trying to keep him. He remembers how she walked away when things didn't align, without drama, without begging, without compromising her dignity. These memories stay with him because they are tied to a feeling of respect, and respect is one of the strongest emotions that can anchor a memory. Even if the relationship doesn't continue, the impact remains. A man may move on, meet other people, and experience different connections, but the standard she set doesn't disappear. It becomes a reference point in his mind. He may not always admit it, but he compares. He notices when others lack the same level of self-respect, the same boundaries, the same quiet confidence. And in those moments, he remembers her not just as a person, but as a standard he once encountered. Self-respect also protects a woman from being undervalued. When she knows her worth, she doesn't settle for less than she deserves. She doesn't stay in situations that drain her or diminish her. This not only preserves her emotional well-being, but also reinforces her value in the eyes of others. People tend to treat you based on what you allow. And when you allow very little that goes against your standards, you naturally receive better treatment. There's also a level of admiration that comes with this. A man may not always understand it immediately, but he admires a woman who can stand on her own, who doesn't need constant validation, and who isn't afraid to walk away from something that doesn't serve her. That admiration turns into respect, and that respect turns into something deeper, something that lingers even after the connection ends. In contrast, when a woman lacks self-respect, it often leads to overcompensation. She may give too much, tolerate too much, and accept behavior that doesn't align with her true desires. While this may keep a man around temporarily, it doesn't create lasting respect. And without respect, there is no strong foundation for memory. The connection becomes something that fades easily because it wasn't built on a solid sense of value. What makes self-respect so powerful is that it doesn't depend on the other person. It exists independently. A woman doesn't become valuable because a man recognizes her worth. He recognizes her worth because she already sees it within herself. And that internal validation is what makes her so difficult to forget. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply being who she is, and that authenticity leaves a lasting impression. In the end, when a woman truly respects herself, she changes the entire dynamic of a relationship. She sets the tone, she defines the standard, and she creates an environment where respect is not optional. A man who experiences that doesn't just see her as another connection, he sees her as someone different, someone rare. And once that kind of respect is established, it doesn't fade easily. It stays in his mind, shaping how he views relationships long after she's gone. When you really understand the power of mystery, you start to see why some women stay on a man's mind long after they're gone. It's not always about what was said or done, it's often about what was not revealed. This is something Steve Harvey has touched on in his own way. Men are naturally drawn to what they don't fully understand. When everything is predictable, interest fades. But when there's a sense of mystery, the mind stays engaged, searching for answers it never fully gets. Mystery isn't about playing games or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about not giving everything away all at once. In a world where people often overshare thoughts, emotions, plans, and even insecurities, someone who holds a part of themselves back feels different. It creates depth. It creates layers. And most importantly, it creates curiosity. A man begins to realize that no matter how much time he spends with her, there's still more to discover. That feeling alone is enough to keep him mentally invested. When a woman doesn't chase, she naturally creates this mystery without even trying. She's not constantly explaining herself, not constantly updating him on every detail of her life, not constantly seeking to be understood. She allows space to exist, and in that space, his mind starts to work. He begins to wonder what she's thinking, what she's feeling, what she's doing. That wondering is powerful because it keeps her present in his thoughts, even when she's physically absent. The human mind doesn't like unfinished stories. When something feels incomplete, it keeps returning to it, trying to make sense of it. A mysterious woman becomes that unfinished story. She doesn't provide all the answers, and because of that, a man keeps replaying moments, conversations, and interactions in his head. He looks for meaning in small details. He tries to connect dots that were never fully drawn. And in doing so, he keeps her alive in his memory. Predictability, on the other hand, has the opposite effect. When a man knows exactly what to expect, when every reaction is obvious, when every emotion is laid out clearly, there's nothing left for him to figure out. The connection becomes easy to understand, but also easy to forget. There's no challenge for the mind, no reason to revisit the experience. It becomes just another interaction that blends into the background. Mystery also creates emotional tension, and tension is what makes experiences memorable. Not tension in a negative sense, but in a way that keeps things interesting. It's the pause before a response, the unexpected change in routine, the moments where he's not entirely sure where he stands. These small uncertainties create a dynamic that keeps him engaged. He pays more attention, he listens more closely, and he becomes more aware of her presence. Another layer to this is that mystery protects a woman's emotional space. When she doesn't reveal everything immediately, she maintains control over her vulnerability. She shares gradually based on trust and consistency rather than giving everything up front. This not only preserves her emotional well-being, but also increases her perceived value. A man begins to understand that getting to know her is a process, not something that happens instantly. And anything that requires time and effort naturally feels more important. There's also a sense of independence tied to mystery. A woman who doesn't chase is often focused on her own life, her own goals, and her own happiness. She's not centered around the man, and because of that, there are parts of her world that he doesn't have full access to. He knows she has a life beyond him, but he doesn't know every detail of it. That creates intrigue. He starts to imagine what she's doing, who she's with, what her world looks like when he's not part of it. That imagination keeps her present in his mind in a way that constant availability never could. Mystery also changes the way a man behaves. When he doesn't have all the answers, he becomes more observant. He pays attention to small cues, to tone, to body language. He tries to understand her on a deeper level because surface level information isn't enough. This deeper level of engagement creates a stronger impression. He's not just interacting with her, he's studying her, trying to figure her out. And that process of figuring someone out is what creates lasting memory. It's important to understand that mystery is not about being distant or cold. It's about balance. A woman can be warm, engaging, and genuine while still maintaining a sense of depth. She can share parts of herself while keeping other parts private. This balance is what makes her feel real yet intriguing. If she shares nothing, she becomes disconnected. If she shares everything, she becomes predictable. But when she finds that middle ground, she becomes unforgettable. Over time, this sense of mystery becomes one of the main reasons a man can't forget her. Even after the connection ends, he doesn't feel like he fully understood her. There are questions that were never answered, layers that were never uncovered. And because of that, his mind keeps going back to her, trying to make sense of something that was never fully revealed. He might remember specific moments, conversations that felt meaningful but incomplete, reactions that surprised him, silences that made him think. These moments stand out because they carried a sense of depth that he couldn't fully grasp. And anything that feels deeper than it appears tends to stay in the mind longer. In contrast, when everything is clear and obvious, there's nothing left to think about. The experience is processed quickly and then stored away without much significance. But when there's mystery, the experience remains active. It continues to unfold in the mind even after it's over. That ongoing mental engagement is what makes it so powerful. A woman who embodies this naturally doesn't need to try to be mysterious. It's simply a result of her not overextending, not oversharing, and not chasing. She lives her life with a sense of self, and she allows others to discover her at their own pace. That pace creates anticipation, and anticipation is one of the strongest emotional drivers there is. In the end, mystery keeps him hooked because it gives his mind something to hold on to. It creates curiosity, emotional tension, and a sense of depth that can't be easily replaced. And once a man experiences that kind of connection, it becomes difficult for him to find it again. That's why he keeps thinking about her, keeps remembering her, and keeps wondering about her long after she's no longer part of his life. Or when you truly understand emotional control, you begin to see why it creates a kind of power that is impossible to ignore or forget. This is something Steve Harvey often reflects in his advice: how a person who can manage their emotions instead of being controlled by them naturally stands out. And when a woman embodies that level of control, it changes how a man sees her, how he treats her, and most importantly, how he remembers her. Emotional control is not about suppressing feelings or pretending not to care. It's about responding with intention instead of reacting impulsively. It's the ability to feel everything but still choose how to express it. In relationships, this becomes incredibly powerful because emotions are often what drive decisions, actions, and conflicts. When someone lacks control, they react quickly, they chase when they feel distance. They over-explain when they feel misunderstood, and they seek reassurance when they feel uncertain. These reactions are natural, but when they happen too often, they reduce a person's sense of stability and value in the eyes of others. A woman with emotional control moves differently. When something feels off, she doesn't panic. When communication slows down, she doesn't immediately assume the worst. When she feels hurt, she doesn't rush to express it in a way that creates chaos. Instead, she takes a step back, processes what she's feeling, and then decides how to respond in a way that aligns with her self-respect. This space between feeling and reaction is where her power lies. For a man, this is something he doesn't encounter often. Many interactions are driven by immediate emotional responses, where situations escalate quickly and misunderstandings turn into arguments. But when he meets a woman who remains calm, who doesn't react impulsively, it creates a completely different experience. There's a sense of stability, a sense of control, and a sense of maturity that stands out immediately. This kind of emotional strength changes the dynamic of the relationship. A man cannot easily manipulate or confuse someone who is emotionally grounded. He cannot rely on inconsistency to keep her engaged. Because she doesn't respond to confusion with more effort, she responds with clarity or distance. If his actions don't align